Everyone. Are we all set, Sam?
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sam, and thank you all for coming. Before my opening remarks, although these are they, I suppose, I want to acknowledge that the land that we are on right now is of the Ohlone. These are the lands that we occupy today. And I want to acknowledge that with an eye toward remedy and recompense, which I think sometimes is missed from land acknowledgements. I want to also acknowledge that our ability to meet here together in safety and prosperity is a privilege resulting from the labor of trafficked and enslaved Africans who created this prosperous nation and along with their descendants pushed the United States toward democracy. Without them, we would all be less free. I am Kathleen Antonia Tarr, descended from enslaved Africans and settlers. I'm a graduate of the University of California at Berkeley, the street, Go Bears, and Harvard Law School. I am the founder and curator of these Getting Played Symposia on equity in the entertainment industry and awards. Gratitude to volunteers, Chris Roseville, who has supported this event every year and even before, Shirley Smallwood, Devin LaBelle, Sam Houston, and Deb Fink. Thank you also to Stanford University's program in Writing and Rhetoric for sponsoring this event every year of its existence. Also, thank you to the Berkeley Public Library for this venue. Giant gratitude to Theater Bay Area also for including a sneak peek of the symposium at its recent annual conference, for inviting me to moderate a community discussion that led to my drafting TBA's white paper on achieving a safe and inclusive Bay Area theater making environment, and for just yesterday republishing my 2001 letter to the editor of what is now called Theater Bay Area Magazine. It was then Callboard, in which I, for the first time, publicly shared my concerns about racial and gender bias in casting. This year, 2024, is the 10th anniversary of the Getting Played Symposium on Equity in the Entertainment Industry and Awards, which I founded in response to what I observed as rampant discrimination in casting, direction, and production. That year, 2015, was also the year I delivered the general session at the annual meeting of the State Bar of California with my guests Amy Peets and Edward James Olmos. The experience of speaking to over 1,000 of California's attorneys about a blind spot they may have inspired me to pen a law review article, Bias and the Business of Show, Employment Discrimination in the Entertainment Industry, later published in the University of San Francisco Law Review Forum. More than 5 years before that, I produced a feature-length documentary, Getting Played, Who's Playing You? That was honorable mention at the 2010 International Black Women's Film Festival. That documentary was also a response, this time to being directed to Be Blacker in a long-running San Francisco musical, and after I protested the racist language, being fired the day before Thanksgiving. An internal email from producer Jeannie Lenders said, "This is happening because she refuses to act more Black." Allegedly neutral arbitrator Mark Burstein concluded these did not amount to race discrimination. The failures of the legal profession is another conversation. All right. There have been numerous other distressing Bay Area theater experiences, from being casually told by an artistic director that I was by far the best auditioner, but the role was for the mother in a family that they were casting white, to arguing with the Violet Hour director Bill English over how a Black woman in 1919 would really act. He saw a stereotype of a Black character who he asserted ran in circles with Paul Robeson, and I countered with the fact that my characterization was based in large part upon my great aunt Mamie Bledsoe, who in fact dated Paul Robeson. Reviewers called my portrayal sublime. Other experiences include auditioning for but not being cast as a Black character who, while the most educated, is still the only character in the script who speaks in broken English. And I asked before auditioning, and very politely actually, whether there was any flexibility about the language. And according to Claudia Rosa, who was in the room after I left, directors blasted, "Who does she think she is? Effing Harvard, yada yada." During my Lion King audition, casting, whose names I would share if I could remember, asked me to be more sassy and ghetto with my characterization of Shenzi. I, for clarification, asked, why? Because there's so many ghetto hyenas in Africa? I should have guessed that what was in store was something like that, because another black thespian who had been so jovial prior stormed out of the audition room and left the building without a word to any of us awaiting our turn. My experiences in Hollywood had so much more, but we don't have the time. When I started acting, I really had no idea that these experiences were the norm. I joyfully supported fellow actors with a casting e-list I created called Roll Call, R-O-L-E, and I gleefully walked into auditions with an enthusiasm and naivete now long gone. Most of these local theater experiences, though, were 20 years ago, and having avoided stage for a while because of the trauma of it all, as I consider a return, I wonder what has changed. Has it changed? Today's conversation, including with you all in the audience, will explore the role online spaces are playing in advancing equity in the local theater community. We will conclude with a presentation of this year's Getting Played Equity Award, which recognizes its recipients for actions normally overlooked but pivotal to advancing equity. So let us welcome, please, our panelists. Bay Area theater folks, Devin LaBelle, woohoo! Black Stage's Kendall Murray, Bay Area theater artist of colors, Zanim Razawi, and San Francisco Line Troops, Michael Jean Sullivan. In the interest of time, I am not going to read their impressive full-length bios, but please visit the website at tinyurl.com/gettingplayed-symposium for links to this and all the symposia over these 10 years. Amazing folks have participated. In fact, Michael Jean Sullivan, I think you're back for the third time, the first time being a Getting Played Equity Award recipient. I encourage you all to spend some time exploring the website. So let's begin. We will have a discussion with our panelists for about 45 minutes to an hour before opening it to questions from the audience. There are postcards for this event on the table and pens. I encourage you to the backside to write any of your questions. Shirley Smallwood, volunteer, will collect them from you when we get to that portion of the program. For those here, again, the bathrooms are right outside the door. This is being recorded, so just make a note of that it may make broadcast later. It's certainly being live streamed now for non-commercial purposes. Okay, so I'm going to begin with you, panelists, and I'm going to bring this mic over there. The mics in the room are not quite working, so we're going to have to use these handhelds. And I'm going to just begin with everyone with the question. I'm going to ask Devin for you to answer first. In what online spaces do you discuss, promote, or otherwise engage local theater? And you may add to that as you wish.
Okay. Hi. Primarily, I'm on Facebook, and that's usually where I'm interacting with people through the Bay Area Theater Folks group and through my own wall, and a little bit on Twitter, but that is a scary void that bounces back some bad feelings, and yeah.
I'm with Black Stage, which is a theater company, part of Stanford University. So we mostly engage, I think, on like Instagram and Fizz, which is basically a social platform similar to Twitter that primarily only runs on universities. And is basically, you only can access the page of that school if you attend the school. So it's basically just Instagram, where a lot of students follow the pages to kind of see postings of like auditions or staff positions opening, and then Fizz, because that's where most people kind of just post upcoming events.
Much like Devin, I also use Facebook mostly, mainly the Bay Area Theater Artists of Color page, which is just a safe space for folks of color to express themselves.
Yeah, also Facebook, because it reaches so many people. Bay Area Theater's Artists of Color, theater artists of color in general. Don't use Twitter because ew. Instagram every once in a while, and I also write essays periodically for different political websites.
Wonderful. Could each of you speak to how do topics of equity arise? Like, what do they look like and what happens if they do in those spaces?
That's a tough one in some ways, because like for the theater arts of color spaces, sometimes it can be very conversational and political, and other times it's just like, we need jobs. You know, how to find places where we can get employed, and also who is lying a lot of times. Which theater companies are saying they're looking for diversity, but actually that's not what they're doing. Which theater companies are saying, oh, we're hiring, we're opening the doors for all these folks, but then you go back and you see who they cast and who they gave jobs to on crew or anywhere, and you go, it's the same group of people that they've employed themselves and their friends again. So I think one of the great things about having the online space is it can reaffirm that you're not crazy, you know? Because the system will try to drive you crazy. The system will say, oh, that, you know, who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? You know? And so having a safe enough space where you can go, I felt weird at this audition. I felt like they didn't really read my resume. I felt like that interview wasn't quite fair, that I was just there because I wasn't who, you know, because I was black or brown or Asian or just not a white person. That having that, I think that's one of the greatest benefits, is the reaffirmation that it's not you, it's them.
Actually, before we even move on, because in theater, I think it was Bay Area theater folks, right? There was a post you put up for a stage manager. You were looking for women of color. Tell us
Yes.
about what happened there.
Well, there was a lot of stuff that happened. So I was directing an all-woman version of Comedy of Errors, and I very much wanted to get a woman to be the stage manager, because what I wanted to avoid was that everybody on this side of the room was male or male identified, and everyone on that side was female or female identified. And there were people who were like, oh my God, this is so sexist! This is so discriminatory! And so it ended up in this long discussion between the people who were not women of color, saying by saying that I was being discriminatory. And I'm like, look, I'm trying to get people to apply for jobs, you know? And there are a lot of people who don't feel welcomed into a space where to apply, to even put their hat in the ring. And so I'm saying, I don't have hiring power in this situation, but why are you so mad that I'm even opening the door for folks? And so it was heartening to see the conversation, to see the argument that happened. In the end, the theater company rolled over the stage manager, who was a man of color, from the previous production. They just rolled him over into my production. But, you know, and I was doing that show also because I wanted to do the all-woman production. I wanted to be historically as accurate as I was going to make it. And I wanted to make sure they all got to sword fight so they could put that on their resumes, because women don't get to do that and have that they've done that on their show. You know, so I was really trying to do what I could to expand it. And so as soon as it came up, it was like, oh, you're not even auditioning men for this? You know? Yeah, no, I'm not. Oh, you're not even asking about, what about us? Oh, the poor downtrodden guys. You know? So I wasn't particularly surprised that the conversation went there, considering Facebook is a national thing, but I was more surprised hearing from the people in the Bay Area. Mm-hmm. You know? That I didn't expect to hear Bay Area people say, oh, well, you know, this is sexist, because they're trying to do is this very specific language thing. Everything that they've done for the past few millennia, that in terms of language, that has gotten them into position power that and as a man, I am in. When you use some of that language, other would say, I'm looking for this sort of person. They're like, you're breaking a rule. You know, you can't do that, even though we did it yesterday. And that was not disheartening, but disappointing.
Thank you. Yeah, so Liam, how do topics of equity arise in the spaces that you're in, and obviously the group that you are admin for? Like, give us a little bit about that.
I mean, Michael Jean just kind of covered everything. That's pretty much what it's like on a daily basis. I think when we're inviting people like women to apply for certain roles, we're not closing the doors for everyone else, we're just inviting people in where they weren't invited before. And I think some audience don't understand that concept. And so their immediate response is to fight back. Where, like you said, you know, they've had these jobs in the past and we're just inviting a more equitable process. So we're making sure that women or people of color are aware that we are vouching for them and they are welcome to apply to a safe space. And it's just that response that really depends on where you post it. And when it's a more public page, group like that, you'll get all kinds of responses. In a more secluded space, it's a safe space to discuss that and ask questions about well, who is on the staff and what has their previous productions looked like, and can we get more information? And it's a much more productive conversation to make people feel safe and heard.
Is there anything specific that's shown up in the area of theater arts and color?
I think one thing that has shown up is that sparked a lot of debate was when a woman auditioned for a show who didn't have a lot of experience, and the director told her that you don't have enough experience to be auditioning for the show. That was their response. And she was like, am I crazy? Should I be auditioning for shows? And then that kind of turned into a ripple effect of like, I've had a similar experience with this person and this company, and they are just trying to, I don't know, gatekeep or make a unsafe space for people of color because she was a Black woman, and that is not what they ended up casting, obviously.
Thank you so much. Kendall?
Yeah, I feel like for us, we don't get like a ton of online engagement or a lot of like, I guess, negative feedback. I think most people on campus, given we are more like a socially liberal, you know, bubble, really recognize the mission that we have to like try to tell stories from like marginalized groups. Like, I think right now we're doing a show called The Mothers that rehearsal started this week, which is about 4 women from the Bay Area who've had a son killed by the police all around like 2015, 2016, which is of course very dark and very sad and very tragic stories to tell, but they're stories that other theater productions on campus wouldn't be able to tell. And so we have like, I guess, similar thing where people were trying to audition for the show that weren't a fit, specifically an Asian male for a story about 4 women of color. But I do think people like recognize our mission and they do really respect it, but we do have a problem with people just not really showing up to these shows. Because it's really a hard balance of like, these are stories that need to be told, but because the subject matter is so like deep and sad and tragic that a lot of people don't want to put themselves through that by going to sit through these shows and going through that whole arc. And so I think we are, as a production company, trying to figure out like, how do we find that balance of being able to tell these stories, but making sure we have an audience that'll be open to listening to these stories.
Thank you. Devin?
I think a lot of the conversations that I am personally involved with in Bay Area theater folks happen not publicly, right? So we will have a post, like Michael Jean Sullivan's post, and I will identify a couple of individuals who are having a real hard time with it. And I will call them in and have conversations with them privately, and if we cannot come to an agreement that they will uphold the values set forth by the group, then they are no longer a member of the group. And I have found that this is mostly white people and men that I have to have these conversations with, and I don't know that it actually advances equity in the community theater. I just know that the conversations change when those people get in them, and it kind of amplifies everything in a very negative way. And sometimes I can like talk to somebody and get them to see that like, hey, this thing that you were asking for is not racist. And sometimes they need to have a timeout, whether that's permanently or temporarily.
And I'll keep it with you, actually. Do you think there are ways in which the space is creating more equity? Or, I mean, it's a huge question that I'm asking all of you, but what are your thoughts?
I mean, for me, it's hard to say what creates more equity in general, because equity is not part of my experience, right? But like I would say that we do make sure that job postings include pay, and specific details so that people know what they're looking at when they get hired or apply for something, and don't have to go through a long process only to find out they're not getting paid at all. And just making sure that people feel comfortable to be able to say the things that they need to say about their projects, right? And at the same time, allowing people the space to engage with other people where they, like, someone makes a post, it is their choice whether or not they want to engage with the people that are yelling back at them. And so, like, if that person does not want to engage, opening it up for other people to engage, and then just making sure that everybody keeps it, just keep it respectful. So I think in that way, sometimes what we do manage to keep it respectful and actually to get people to slow down, because when you're typing in a fury and all the words are coming out all at once, that and every neuron in your brain is firing and there's anger, they're not thinking clearly when they're typing these things a lot of times, especially when there's anger and it feels like it's personal. So getting that just to slow down and actually read the thing that someone has posted and actually think about it. And as we get people to think more critically, I do think that opens up the possibility that they're going to engage with things in a way that does make equity more possible within the community specifically.
Thank you. And
Yeah.
if you're permitted to share,
Yeah.
there was a post that went up, someone was looking for white women 18 to 30 for a film. I did not notice the person who posted ever engaged. What can you tell us about that? I know you might not be able to tell us a lot.
Well, I reached out to him and he did not reply. I made a comment on the group saying, what do you think? Because it was like, we didn't know whether or not the casting was germane to the story, correct?
Correct, yeah.
So how do you make a post like that? And I got some community members that had some ideas, maybe one or two, but I didn't know at that point whether or not to take the post down, because once a community has engaged with a post and someone has liked something that someone has said that is insightful, it feels like it should stay up, but at the same time, that person never engaged with the group again after that.
Mm-hmm.
So is there value in keeping the post up? Is there value in removing it? I mean, as an example of what not to do, it seems good, especially when you have the little admin thing that says, hey, I've seen this, I don't know what to do about it. If someone had said to me, please take it down. I mean, this has happened a couple of times where there's an actor who continues to have their photos put in the Chronicle from a pre-transition time. And I asked them once if we should remove those posts because, that might be a traumatic situation, right? And privately, and they said, no, please keep those up. So if it involves someone specifically, I try to reach out to that person and see what their feelings are about it. And if it is, like that weird post, I don't know. We have a policy where you're not supposed to dirty delete things.
Right.
So I think those things. I'm sorry, I forgot what the question is. I'm just kind of spiraling into space.
No, I think you're doing great. I mean, and it goes to the next question that anyone can answer. It's what are the types of things that you do, those steps, right, to making sure that you have to put the pay in there by having private conversations with people. What are the other types of things that you are either seeing or just doing in your capacities, the rest of you?
I think for us, for every, email or post we send, we always put in character descriptions of, or at least when it comes to casting, in terms of listing out specifically who we're looking for, and then specifically establishing if we're looking for someone of a certain race or ethnicity. So when it comes to the mothers, the ethnicity of the women that play the mothers is very instrumental in the story. But if it's something that can be more open-ended, then we make sure to make that clear, because we are trying to encourage as many people as possible to try out for these roles and be part of these productions. Especially if it's going to be a show that no other theater production will be a part of. Of course, we're like a school, so we can't pay, but we do try to make sure we establish that we are also a community and we're going to be there for you. We don't want it to be like a huge like burden on you if you feel like you have a lot going on in the quarter. We have like a pretty solid like slate or board that will help ease any of like the stress. Just because we want to make sure we create the space for people who want to be a part of it. And so if you have a heavy quarter, we still want you to be involved in some capacity. And so we often just try to find a role for them. I think it's just basically just creating more spaces for people to take advantage of that feel like they otherwise couldn't.
Yeah, I think it's just the same thing, right? Making sure pay is clearly somewhere in the post and not through 5 different links that you have to click through to eventually get to. Just make it as clear as possible. Yes, some people have the capacity to do community theater and some people don't. So the more out there it is, the easier it is for not wasting anyone's time. And just kind of making sure, like Devin does, just making sure you're reading the posts and everything continues to be civil and having productive conversations rather than just angry conversations.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's part of it. The idea of just being civil and seeing the person for who they are, because there was a certain wave that went through of liberalism that went through barrier, which is trying to treat everybody exactly the same. But people have their history, their culture, their differences, you know, and you should see that person as an individual, but as don't dismiss everything about them that isn't the same as about you, but don't be condescending about it, you know. It just takes a little more being a person, and I understand that. I think that for a lot of people, they struggle with in a casting situation because they don't want to offend people unless they really just don't give a damn, and they struggle with not wanting to be the bad person, and that gets in the way of them just being honest, you know, and just saying, you know, this is the situation, here's the pay, here are the roles, here's what we're looking at, you know, and why we're doing it this way. And sometimes that's going to butt up against their tradition. You know, like there's a push after Cal Shakes died, and there were people saying, oh, well, Cal Shakes, their big problem was that they started getting away from doing traditional Shakespeare. That their problem was they were doing this other stuff involving open casting and other cultures. And it's like, Black Odyssey was the biggest hit they had. And before that, Spunk was the biggest hit they had. You know, but there are always going to be people on the board or wherever who, when a theater company or organization hits a hard time, they use it to be antediluvian in my mind, but to be traditional. And they want to fall back to the traditional casting. And if they're not doing that, they're so far out of their comfort zone that it ends up being very off-putting. They don't see how their traditional racism is leaking out, and, like we were saying, how people feel disinvited to be a part of it. They go, well, we didn't cast any women of color because none showed up. And I was like, well, given the history of being disinvited, you have to go an extra step, you know. You have to go an extra step to make sure that people feel invited. Oh, why don't I have to do that with, Jerry Monroe? Okay, but he has, nice guy though he is, he doesn't have that, personal or cultural history of being oppressed, of being disinvited. So it is extra work for everyone to do, casting directors, theater companies, directors, and it is so easy for them because of the economic situation to say we have to pull back. We have to make safer choices. We have to give the audience what they want. It's like, without asking them. We have to give the board what they want. We have to give our Silicon Valley bros who are giving us lots of money what they say they want, which is normally a play about them. So the constant struggle to make sure that people are seen and heard and represented, there is no finish line to that. In the same way, the struggle to have anyone on stage and backstage, because that's such an important point with, Bay Area theater artists, Bay Area theater artists of color, all it's saying, because it's easy to throw a show on stage and go, hey, look, we're doing, Yankee Dog, You Die. But for those of you who remember Yankee Dog, You Die. But everybody backstage, everybody at the theater company, everybody else is just like a white guy, and they're talented and they've got history and they know what they're doing, but they don't see that. They don't necessarily see that they're kind of in yellowface. Their theater company is, They're putting on a black show. It's really, you're presenting this to, you're misrepresenting your own theater company to the audience. So it is a constant struggle, and that's why it is so important for all of us to constantly be talking about what it takes, and to constantly call people to task about their casting and hiring.
Thank you. I'd love to hear from the rest of you too. I know we had a discussion even before it began about financing. So how does the financial aspect play into all of this? And as far as
I have a lot to say. Well, financing is particularly difficult because the same thing, a lot of foundations, a lot of organizations, a lot of municipalities have decided that, especially specifically after the George Floyd murder, that they wanted to say, that's not us. And so, despite the fact that they all raised their police budgets, they also threw a bunch of money into after-school programs and dramatic programs and stuff like that, and more into the idea of, well, which community are you serving? You have to, what is going to be your impact on that community, which you can never really predict. How are you interacting with that community while you're creating the piece? That you can predict. But the idea that it's like, well, this is a black play, and this is an Asian play. And so which community center are you working with? So when I wrote The Great Con, which was black and Asian, they were like, you have to pick one, basically. You want grants for this? And I was like, no, this is what the show's about. And so having that idea, it's like, pick your group. And so it's such a weird financial segregation that that these organizations that are pitching themselves as on our side, pitching themselves as diverse, what they're actually doing frequently is de-diversifying by saying, like, oh, we've got a black person in the room, therefore the room is diverse. It's all white people. And then they get rid of that person, they bring an Asian in the room, say, see, now we're the diverse group. But if they have a black person and the Asian person in the room at the same time, it's a gang. So we have to, that's another thing about calling them to task and going, the communities, each one of these communities is bigger than you think it is. You can't just say we're going to give money to the Pacific Islanders and go, well, the Pacific Islanders, Samoa has a relationship with the black American community. You have to acknowledge that. You have to stop thinking of us in these little pigeonholes and stop funding us that way. Because once you're doing that, then you are saying that this is all this is. So the idea of going to see a show at Asian American Theater Company, when we had one, in those days it was like, lots of people went. You didn't have to be Asian American to go to see Asian American Theater Company. But the funding starts squeezing down. Oh, this show's about Japanese Americans. This one's about Asian Americans, Chinese Americans. This is Thai Americans. This is Hmong, And it gets so spinally diced that no one is learning about another culture. Because the theaters are funded to do a show about a specific culture and pitch for that audience. Next show, this audience. And it's for a theater like the Mime Troupe, where our constituency is the working class. None of these grants apply to us, because we may do a show and it's all about the working class and Death to the Pigs. But it's a comedy. But then when they're like, well, you've got a black cast, so is it about the black community? And we have to go, well, not exactly. The show's about black people who are in the working class. And like, well, that doesn't apply because, it's working class, political. And we don't nobody funds political theater. So So I think that finally slicing separation for theaters and for funding is really another part of killing theater, because they don't get a diverse audience.
Thank you.
Financial funding, that was the question. Yeah, I think in the Bay Area, obviously, we are trying to represent the culture that we are serving, which is a wide range of people. And from the beginning of like making sure that it is transparent of how much you're paying people, one, that's a California law. The law states that you have to slate a range, which is also its own problem, because you can say it's between $15 to $100 an hour. And that could mean anything, right? So it's a little more clear in theater, where we have to call people to task now, because in the past, you know, just like women were making 15 cents to the dollar, the black actor was making 15 cents to the dollar too, and they had no idea until they asked one of their castmates, right? And so that pay transparency has to be a lot more clear now, and part of our jobs as administrators and casting directors is to make that clear and call the powers that be to task of like, how are we making this equitable for the communities that we want to serve?
Yeah, I think funding is really tough, at least for us, because we're a student organization that we basically have to apply for annual funding, maybe like winter quarter the year before. And so you have to try to anticipate everything that's possibly going to pop up that you're going to need to pay for, which everyone knows is almost impossible, because sometimes contracts expire that you have to pay to renew, or you have to get costumes or set design. And I think there's like a rule that you can't ask for more than, I think, like 5% of the previous year's budget. And so as we're trying to expand as an org, we're like financially restricted from trying to throw on these more maybe elaborate productions that will attract a larger audience. And so oftentimes we do just have to, I think, make sacrifices of like costuming, having like actors use their own clothes, which is a little unfortunate, especially because we can't sell tickets, so we don't make any of the money back that we could use for like a later production within that year. And so I think it's basically just one of the downsides of being maybe a smaller production company on campus, as opposed to like Ram's Head, which is our largest org. But sometimes, you know, Stanford likes to be like, let's give to our arts, and has like a grant that might pop up here or there that we have to apply for and fight for from with like 15 other orgs. But I don't know, I think we try to make do. Luckily, at least for spaces, we don't have to like pay to reserve the spaces. It's just fighting in order to get some sort of dates that work. But yeah, I don't know. I think we just try to make it work, because we recognize that like our mission is so important, and that in order for us to just keep growing, we just have to keep throwing on shows. So.
Thank you.
I don't do a lot of stuff with funding, other than trying to do the fundraiser for this.
Yes.
But one of the things that someone told me a long time ago, and weirdly my friend Karina mentioned during her talk at TBA, was that you should always be looking for your replacement. So one of the things that I have done in my capacity as a prop shop supervisor, can't say manager because it's a state job, at state is, I think we've had 8 student assistants in the time that I've been there, and 7 of them have been people of color. And so what I used to do, I think I did like 25 shows a year when I was a prop person a long time ago. And I realized that that's not sustainable, and all the money should be going to me, and I have this other job now. So try to find people and get them to, you know, take that job. But there wasn't the mentorship, because there weren't people in my position who were doing the mentorship. So what I did was like make sure those opportunities were available whenever it would come across my desk, and it seemed like a fair contract, get my students to be involved. Now that does mean that people who aren't going to the prop shop aren't going to be open to that opportunity, but like just like even to get your foot in a door at a theater company, like just being a mentor to anybody who asks me any sort of question about props whatsoever is a way that I can like help them develop their skills and help them get more money in the long run.
Thank you. Yeah. What is, for any of you, what is your sense of what entertainment is available online? Like, how is online entertainment in other forms? Because it seems like, is that also impacting how much funding is available for you, or how many audiences are showing up, thus how much you're able to support equity in theater? Like, I'm just trying to wonder, is there a connection between all that and the ultimate product you know, seeing audiences get thinner and that type of thing, and that's for any of you to speak to. Everyone's calling out you, Michael.
Oh. Wait my turn. Well, so when the pandemic happened, before the pandemic happened, we started videoing our shows so that people, since the Mind Troop doesn't tour nationally as much as we used to, as much as we'd like to, we started videoing the shows and then running them during the run, you know, if Equity would let us. And then when the pandemic hit, we were like, well, we can't do park shows. So we got back to Equity, found out if we could show one of our old shows online, stream it on Vimeo, and then I started to write radio plays. And so we did radio plays for 2 years of telling all these, you know, again, still political comedies, not musicals, but political, you know, kind of, in some ways we could do more. We could have more places things are happening, small cast, we could use actors around the country to try to continue getting our particular political voice out there. A couple of other theater companies in the United States did it, and I would hope that they would be able to continue because it allows you to tell bigger stories and more of the play, you know, costumes, sets, and light all happen in the audience's mind, which is free. And being able to really focus on what you want to talk about. You know, a black woman, one of the plays that I wrote was a black woman working at a conservative television station, and what she's going through both as a black journalist and as a woman. And so being able to tell that story, that then some of these things later became main stage Mind Troop shows. But being able to use the medium for, you know, to continue to be revolutionary and use the medium. And not everybody sees it that way. You know, people will say, oh, well, you know, yes, Facebook, Instagram, and all of these things, and they're great for promotion, because that's what they're good for. That and getting in touch with your audience. But to be able to actively make things that you can get out there and that can continue to live. One of the great tragedies of theater is a great show closes. But if you have a radio play or a short film, you put that on and it's just on forever. And you can keep directing people to it. Whenever that message of that piece of art is important again, you can put it back on. So if you've got, and you can do original stuff much more easily, you know, and it can be a sketch, it can be 5 minutes. But you can talk about these issues in a way that, because no one else is doing it, you can do it. Cast a couple of your friends, you know, get a good editor and some sound effects, do they're not called radio plays, they're scripted podcasts. That's the nouveau language, because if you say radio play, you know, some people's heads blow up. But you can then do that and then promote that, make that into a series. Talk about the issues that you feel you're not seeing dealt with in this particular medium. And, you know, so I'm always encouraging people, it's like, do these things, and then you can get it out, link to it, get other people to share it, to be able to tell these stories. Use the medium the way we need it to be used, you know. Go make a short film and put it on YouTube, you know, because, I mean, the good thing about short films is that you get to see who's reading the parts. The thing about radio plays is they can't see the person, they don't know if that person's Asian or black or whatever, so you have to make that play about that. But I've had auditions for radio plays since then. It's like, it became a thing because of us. Where they've been very specific, you know, which is great, where they're like, we need this person to be of this type. We need to make sure this is an audition for a radio show. We need to see your face. Because they don't want the, you know, Mel Blanc, Paul Frees, these voice artists who can do everything to take these roles. We want to make sure that we are doing what we can. But, so, there's a film that came out a few years ago. What was it? Kubo and the Two Strings. Anybody see Kubo and the Two Strings? It's an animated film. Japanese film. Well, American film. About a story about a young Japanese boy who's struggling with the gods, like you do. Almost every voice in that was a European.
Oh my.
It was a Hollywood film, but it was like, I was like looking at the credits because I didn't recognize their voices. And I was going through it, and it's like, oh my God, the designers, the writers, the director, everybody was of distinct European descent. And with animated films, you can get away with that, you know? Whereas I've also auditioned for things where I auditioned for a cartoon one time, and I came in and I kept doing it through recording it. Got to the final callback. The producers, who were from Germany, flew out to San Francisco to meet me. And as soon as they saw me, they told my agent, he sounds too urban. So.
You sound too urban?
Too urban. I'm too urban for them.
Michael.
Yeah, I know. Everybody knows what you're talking about.
Michael
James Sullivan, too urban for them.
Oh my
And it was like, and the thing was, I was doing an English accent for them. You know? I was being this old creepy English scientist. But when they saw me, all of that went out the window.
Oh, man.
So what they can get away with, what they expect, it is heartbreaking. And that is why it's so important for us when it comes to scripted podcasts / radio plays, or all of that, the internet medium, to make our own stuff. Audition for their stuff, give them a hard time when they don't cast us, but also make our own stuff. I'll hand you the sweaty microphone.
Nothing to add to that.
I mean, obviously there's so many stories, right? And so part of this is because I've been in it for so long, and part of it is wondering, like, what has changed. You made me remember at one of my cartoon or voiceover things where I was doing, it was a Japanese character, but they were explaining to the Japanese producers when they came, the guy, I mean, he said it in this most offensive way, why this black girl was voicing this particular character. And I think the actual character I was voicing was white. Little did you know I speak Japanese. So I had a whole conversation with producers about like these challenges, and they were laughing, like we're laughing, and the director had no idea what we were talking about. But yeah, it's a big problem. I would love if the three of you also, are there moments that you would like to share that illuminate some of these challenges like Michael was talking about?
I don't know. I mean, I think this is just like, I think theater as a whole in terms of just like long form entertainment because of like platforms like TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, which really is that short form content, like that 7 to 10 seconds that the Gen Z has really like touched in on, especially like during COVID or the pandemic when we're all locked in dorms, that everyone was just like consuming the short form content, that now it's hard for people to watch like a whole movie without like going on their phone or without pausing it to go to the bathroom or take a break or do a snack or to watch a movie uninterrupted without like doing work on the side. And so I feel like for theater, you literally can't do that. Like you can't pull out your phone or you can't do work. And so I feel like we do just have smaller audiences overall because people aren't able to actually sit. I know it's kind of crazy to say, but people can't sit for like 2 hours anymore without having to take a break so they can scroll on like Reddit or whatnot. So I do think that's like not like very specific to like local theater, but just like theater and like movie theaters and everything as a whole.
Thank you. Is there anything to add, Deb?
This is something I mentioned briefly at the TBA bit, the mini conference, the mini panel. I don't necessarily see the theater and the online is taking away from the theater. I think it's creating a different sort of a community, and I think there are people who are drawn to online things aren't necessarily going to be the people that are drawn to theater. And an example is in Vallejo, where I live, there's an artist, a music artist named La Russell, and La Russell has a huge online presence and produces videos with his group of artists. Like, you've got a videographer and a social media person, and they're making videos all the time. And they also have live events all the time in the backyard of his mom's house. They had a big live event at the fairgrounds in Vallejo, and they're always making videos like locally in local businesses, or they're also doing things like they made enough money that now you can go have brunch on La Russell. You just go to Momo's Cafe on Georgia Street and you say, hey, I'm having breakfast on La Russell, and you can have a free breakfast there. And I think that there is something that is happening or can happen with online communities that I have personally not seen happen with theater in a long time. And that there is an interest of togetherness, and there is something that like makes people want to be involved with something. And then if you took that person who is doing their own thing, who is being successful at their own thing, and asked them to come to a theater event where they would be like working with or under somebody and not able to do their own thing, I don't know what the appeal would be there. So like it, instead of like, because there is a part of me that's like, oh, these things are in opposition together. I think that if we like put our energy and focus into finding ways that we could work together, that maybe we could get people to participate in our communities and in a bigger and different way.
On that, and this is also for all of you, is there a way you think that online spaces, including the one you administer, like, are there ways that it can be even better leveraged to advance equity in local theater? Are there things that now you're thinking of that are ways that we could do that?
I would like local theater companies, particularly those who have been problematic in the past, to engage more with the content that they post. I would like them to have those hard conversations with the community members, and have some self-accountability, right? There have been a number of times where I have like just in passing said something on an ACT post or something, and no one ever they don't look at that, they don't read that, they don't engage with that. So like if the value of the online space is valuable for you to advertise but not valuable for you to like engage with your community, you have no business being in that space. I think that like these are like individually we've created our own individual footprint of who we are online, and we choose to engage with who we choose to engage with. And if I choose to engage with you, theater company, like you should see my humanity and not this little faceless avatar. And I would like that, like it just makes me feel like that they don't want us to be part of their community. And so, like, gosh, that got bleak.
That's a great insight.
So so engage more with your audience members. Engage more with your critics in a way that is fruitful. Like have a conversation. Don't be afraid to like mess it up, because even though the internet never forgets, like I'm gonna see you person at Berkeley Rep, and I'm gonna remember that you didn't talk to me.
Yeah, Kendall, what do you think? Online spaces, how can they be better leveraged?
At least in terms of like for school, I think just kind of utilizing it a lot more. I think we all recognize social media is very powerful for the reach it has, that not many people, at least my generation, don't really, read newspapers or flyers are posted. Not many people are stopping anymore to kind of read flyers that are on bulletin boards. And so really utilizing like the social media apps that a lot of the students are using. So like Fizz, which like every Stanford student just kind of has, where a lot of people make announcements about what's happening on campus, or making random jokes about classes and professors. I feel like at least as an org, we really don't really respect that app because of like what it's kind of turned into, but we don't recognize the number of eyes that are using that app. And so we utilize those spaces more. Just to make sure we get the word out there, because there are a lot of times where I mention someone who I know is interested in theater, like, hey, my theater group is doing this and you want to join, and they're like, what are you talking about? Like, I've never heard of this group at all. And so I think just getting the word out there so many people are aware of it. And yeah, I think even using like Instagram more, because I think I'm not someone who's on social media a lot, but I forget a lot of people are. And so just making sure we're fully taking advantage of that, since we are in a place of privilege where we don't get a ton of like negative engagement, but we should really just utilize it for the tool that it is.
I think just having that two-way dialogue is going to be very helpful. We tend to see a lot of posts and like a lot of shared of like, I'm just going to e-blast this to every single group that I can, and then I'm going to close my computer and never go back to that again. But it's like, but I have questions about that. And if you are truly being an equitable space, how can I go to the right person? Are you the right person? Are you just the social media manager, or do you have answers? And if you don't have the answers, who can I speak to about this post? I think that would be a lot more equitable. I don't think the online media is necessarily taking away from the in-person events. I think now, just with, you know, immunocompromised folks, it is actually becoming a little more equitable so that everyone can still enjoy, you know, a live performance, whether that be at home or in the theater. And also, you know, a college student is not going to be able to go to New York to see this brand new play that they've been wanting to see that represents maybe them or something in their identity. But if they do have a live streaming, then they can see that. And so how do we make that kind of a more equitable space and continue to find new ways to do so?
Thank you.
Yeah, you said
Well, we're gonna let the audience ask questions, if there are questions from the audience, so we will look for those hands. I'm gonna keep asking, but all volunteers, let us know if you see any hands, just shout my name. Because I'm very interested, so Leslie Kirby is here, and she was interviewed in my documentary, actually, about getting played. And one of the things that she said, which stays with me always, because I never understood it and I always took it for granted, she just said sort of casually, as well, not everybody likes to think. And for me, that was revolution. Like, I didn't understand that at all. I had always thought that as a people, because for me, it's like my favorite hobby, right? It's my favorite pastime. So it's like, where people are not wanting to even think about these issues. I don't know, where do we even begin with that? Wanting, you know, trying to get people engaged in this, trying to get them to support it, trying to even think about where their dollars are going. Like, how does all of that turn if, you know, given that circumstance?
I mean, I think if you don't want to think, this might not be the industry for you. Especially with what we were saying earlier, how we're trying to become a more equitable and diverse space, and, you know, some directors or administrators are like, well, they're just not coming to us. Well, maybe you have to think about why they're not coming to you, and what efforts can you make to change that, rather than just shut it down and be like, well, I'm not going to chase after anyone. Well, then they're not going to chase after you either, right? So it has to be, you have to think in this industry. I mean, we're making political theater, we're making, you know, entertainment theater, and there's a lot of involvement that needs to happen.
Yeah, and I think, and you know, for the audience, the people who just want to show up and be entertained, it's like pushing them slightly out of their comfort zone, where they have to think, and have to think of what does this mean. I saw Wendell Pierce did Death of a Salesman in New York, and great show, great production. But there are people who, it's a great script, and the actors did a great job. It was a good set. The lighting was amazing. Everything about that production worked. But there are people who it made them think, and they didn't want to. They wanted to go and see a classic play, so that they could say they'd seen the classic play, and they could say they'd seen a popular version. But hearing people in the lobby and hearing people outside afterwards, it was like, well, why are they black? Yeah, so they're having to think about it, which isn't a bad thing. It's a stupid question, but it's good that they were, hopefully they were challenging themselves a bit with that. You know, if you're seeing, you know, the all-woman Shakespeare, if you're seeing, you know, Asian American production of All My Sons, which I really think somebody should do. That all of these things, that the thoughts that you should have should be about, why was that difficult for me? You know, why was that a challenge to me? And as we know, coming up on the up on the election, there's a huge percentage of Americans who simply do not want to feel challenged. They do not want to they don't want to think about it. They want somebody else to do all the thinking and give them a simple tweet long, and the old kind of tweet, not the new ones, the old tweet long answer of who to love, who to hate, and how it's not your fault. And anything past that, they, unfortunately, American audiences really do struggle with. And so the idea of that, the attention span that has shrunken so precipitously, and it's like, I remember seeing an English comedian one time, he was talking about the difference in England. You would have something and it was upon request. You could go online and you could see a movie or you could see a fight or whatever. It was upon request. Move to the United States, the language is different. It's on demand. You know? And he's saying just that shift, that this, I'm demanding this as opposed to requesting it. So Americans want things on demand. And we're not used to taking anyone else into consideration. And that has become less and less the case for 49% of the country, you know. And it's become so much worse with living in an upon-demand online world. I want to see this, and I'm tired of hearing this person. I want to see this. I'm tired of hearing them. I want to see this. And I can get into a little silo where I'm just seeing exactly what I want to see in the people and things and comments that reinforce what I already think. And theater doesn't do that. Theater specifically isn't supposed to be reinforcing what you already think. And so that's a struggle, and how we're going to overcome that, I have no idea, but it's what we have to do.
Yeah, I don't know. I think another, similar problem we have is because we are so like STEM dominated. How do we tell these people that spent like their entire lives like writing lines of code or spending their days in like a biology lab to care about us who want to like sing and dance? I think it's a valid question and a valid concern. And I don't know, I think that's where we struggle when it comes to like choosing shows, because that's where a show like SpongeBob the Musical is very mass appealing, because a lot of people grew up watching SpongeBob, so they're like, okay, I'll go watch a show about SpongeBob, but how do I watch a show like The Mothers, where it's like this really like subject matter that makes you think so much, especially something that make them so uncomfortable, growing up in probably like privileged Silicon Valley or just like other areas where they've not had to really encounter like police brutality or have those like really hard conversations. I don't really have an answer for how we can fix that, but it is definitely a common struggle that we have, that to let alone be a part of the production, to just go ahead and watch it, we're still trying to get those audience members.
I can hear the baby.
I know.
He's fine. This just made me think a little bit about like thinking about instant gratification, but also like escapism and like who gets to do that, right? So like there are plenty of opportunities for me to engage in escapism content where I don't have to think, but I don't necessarily know that that's true for everybody, because like how many plays that I have personally worked on where like is even you know, plays about people of color that have been about struggles and have been about, you know, and obviously we need those stories and they're important, but there is something about like a play about people of color for a white audience and how you have to like coddle and like, you know, take care of those people in order to get them to engage with it and not like check out. But like I guess I just wonder, like, has there been a play that you have worked on specifically about stories that are important to you, or that you have seen where you felt like it was like a beautiful spectacle or an escapism or somewhere where you like felt really comfortable? Or is that bad? Is that bad? Do you know what I mean? I guess because the internet allows some of us to like have escapism. I'm wondering, like, we don't want that in art. We don't want to see like here, like, is there, here's an example, like Spirited Away is doing a performance, lots of spectacle, lots of escapism, that sort of a thing, and I think that has the broad mass appeal that we were talking about earlier. But like, have you ever been able to like work on a show where like you, or go see a show where you felt that and like felt good about it, or has it always been like, sorry?
Do you mean like saw it and then like while you're in it feel like you're seeing something that is making you think, but you also feel really supported? And I think, yeah, the Lorraine Hansberry that I just saw about Black women's, Black feminist guide to the human body, I think absolutely gave me that feeling in the show for sure. I don't know that that means all the time though, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm
Yeah,
curious.
I have no idea. I'm trying to parse your question.
Me too.
Because, I mean, there are definitely bits of art that are like you can always go back and watch Fantasia.
Right.
You know,
Right, yeah.
beautiful, amazing. You know,
Yeah.
they were supposed to do that every year. The original plan for Fantasia was they were going to it was going to be running in perpetuity in a theater. And they would just bring in new artists every year. And so it was both supposed to be an escapism, but at the same time, always fresh and new. But what we think of, even with Fantasia, the European refugees who were coming over between the wars and after the war, classical music meant something different to them than it did to Americans. So it wasn't exactly escapism. For them, it was a little nostalgia, and it was for what it represented a way of life that was gone now for them. So really, I don't think that there's such thing as apolitical theater. You're either challenging the status quo or upholding the status quo, and this one normally just pisses me off. Actually, always just pisses me off. So, or the audience pisses me off. I'm just pissed off. So, I think that it's hard to say what that, I might go back and watch Seven Samurai, a great film, perhaps the best. But I'm still watching it through political eyeballs and still seeing what they're saying about how the culture is changing, how the women are treated, what is the class thing going on. So I think in everything that exists in it, if you look for it, and some people just want to relax and not do that. I never saw SpongeBob the musical. But I did see Mr. Burns.
Mr. Burns the musical?
Yes. God, I hated that play. And I hated it so much that when I left the theater, it played at ACT, and when I left the theater, I turned to my wife and went, and she went, not now. Wait until we get 3 blocks from the theater. So we walked for 3 blocks, and then it was like we hit, where it was, like Cyril Magnan and Powell. And I was like, oh my God! Because it was trying to be deep, but it was trying to be just a light entertainment. And it failed at both. And they made money in that. But it had the veneer of political theater. They could say that it was about something, but it wasn't. So I think ultimately people do want it to be about something, no matter how shallow that may be. They may just not want to know it ahead of time. They may not want it in their face. They may not want to go see Black Women's Guide because they're like, oh, I'm not Black, I'm not a woman, I'm not guided, I don't want it, I'm not a humanist. So they may not want it, but the shows that last, that endure, that make a difference are the ones that are about something. And when they get remounted, like Shakespeare or Moliere or whatever, to remount a show is to make it relevant to the audience again. So I don't think it's on the production side, unless you're doing nonsense, the production side to really pick something that's about nothing. I was teaching a class one time of playwriting, and this one student said they wanted to do a play about nothing. Can I just write a play that's not political? And I said, sure, go ahead. So the play they wrote took place in this factory where this worker is trying to organize a union, but he falls in love with the boss's daughter, and he has to decide between the union and getting married. And I was like, how is this not political? But he because he wasn't thinking of it that way, but it absolutely was. So I think it's all political. It's just whether or not you warn the audience first.
I guess that actually reminded me of a conversation I had earlier this year. I went to New York for the very first time earlier this year, and then I wanted to see as many Broadway shows as I could. And one of them I saw was Notebook, the musical, which, in case you're not familiar, basically it takes place at 3 different time periods of both the main characters. But it's kind of like colorblind casting, where the young Allie and middle Allie are played by Black actresses, but the older Allie is a white actress. And then vice versa for Noah, middle and young is played by a white actor, and then the oldest Noah is played by a Black actor, which is I feel But I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed it because it didn't bother me, because it's clearly like, oh, this is a story, Allie and Noah finding love through different stages of their life. But when I was waiting, when you stand outside the box office in the morning, to rush, rush tickets, So I was there 2 hours early to rush because I was not paying full price. I got in a conversation with a lady who was absolutely appalled that was the casting decisions they made. She's like, it's too confusing. I don't understand what's happening. But I'm like, but it's not confusing when you watch it, because rarely are both actors on stage at the same time, but they have the same name. They're wearing pretty much the same clothes. And so for a show like Notebook the Musical, where you be maybe it's not inherently political, if there's just a romance, especially if you just watch the movie, there are ways people will try to make it political, even when it's not intended to be in certain ways, like the casting decisions. And I guess that also, I'm curious if for your guys' shows, if you've done colorblind casting, about a lot of controversy that's maybe occurred for you all, even if it wasn't intended to be offensive, someone found offense in it.
Shows that we've been
in, or seen or directed, or part of your productions.
There was a production that happened at the Magic Theater years ago where the set was a giant map of the world, and they totally open cast the show. And I talked to somebody who saw the show, and it baffled them. The daughter was white, the father was black, the mother was Asian, and the show was clearly supposed to be about all of these different people in this situation. And he said he could not get past that the cast was mixed. That it was non-traditionally cast, and I was like, that's your problem. That it's good that he felt challenged, and I hope that before he died, because I think he's dead, I did not kill him, but pretty sure he's dead, that he hopefully got to a point where, because he was with his son at the time, and he couldn't explain the show to his son. Hopefully his son grew up and explained it to him. But I think that essential idea of, even with a show like The Notebook, like you were saying, it may not be inherently political, but by casting it that way, it's a challenge to the audience. What is the world they want to live in? What are they, and will they fit in the future? Can they challenge themselves to see, basically, if you're can you see somebody that's not you as human? That's unfortunately enough of a political challenge in the United States right now, as depressing as that is.
Yeah, and I feel that's so difficult, especially when we're talking about equity in theater spaces. By having colorblind casting, well, now you're opening up to so many different actors that don't have to fit in towards certain race or ethnicity. But then you have people that are pushing against that and trying to force us back into these, okay, well, it has to be white actor, even though for the story it doesn't really matter. Mm-hmm.
Well, that goes back to they have to think. They have to think about okay, why is this person playing this person? They have to keep track of the character, and that's too much work, right? Some audience just want to go and be entertained, and that just doesn't work for them. Going back to your question about escapism, I think with all of these political experiences, I don't think it's possible necessarily, for me at least, to fully escape into a show, even if it's something that represents me or my culture. And as an Afghan American, every single play I've seen about Afghan American has been highly political, including The Kite Runner, which is an ACT that had not one single Afghan person in their cast. That one, as well as the second one is Thousand Splendid Suns. Not a single Afghan person in either of those casts. They did have a cultural consultant who was Afghan, but that was about it. So there's you can't escape, because you're there's a little bit of inauthenticity in all of these things.
Ew.
ACT?
Oh man. I remember when I did Colossus of Rhodes at ACT, they decided my hairstyle based on how cute they were going to make it, versus that I'm supposed to be playing an African character from a very specific region. Oh my gosh, I can't even start down this road. I have so many things that it made me think I was cast as a lead in this film with people I've worked with before, and so I tried to use my power position to say, great, you're casting my romantic counter, please prioritize an Asian male, because Asian men were so treated as non-romantic people and that type of a thing. And because I even just asked the question, they dropped me from the production entirely, right?
Wow.
I don't know. There's so much. There's so much. Any last thoughts that any of you want to share with us about, obviously the big question about the role of online spaces in advancing equity in the local theater community, or how any of these conversations, including about how tough it might be to make people embrace thinking. But anything like that, any last thoughts that you want to add before we close?
If you are a moderator or interested in being a moderator and look like me, listen more than you talk, and try to, create the safest space that you can for discussion to happen.
Yeah, I think I try to encourage as many young people as I can to truly care about theater, because I don't like when people say theater is a dying industry. I know COVID really took a huge hit to everything. But yeah, I don't know, I think we definitely need young people to be more involved and truly care about it, since we are the next generation that's going to continue this legacy and to continue having these type of productions and companies all around. And yeah, I think try to, stay involved, try attending local theater shows, even if you don't want to be a part of it, don't have the capacity to be a part of it, by just supporting, even financially, I think makes a huge difference.
Yeah, and just keep engaging and sharing in the online presence. If maybe something doesn't fit to you, it will somebody in your audience, and that's how we kind of spread the word. So the more eyes are on it, the better.
Yeah, sharing other people's work, sharing, linking to everything else, linking to Bay Area theater artists, Bay Area theater artists of color, making sure that we see it as a community and putting the word out, but also, really importantly, never backing up. At this particular time of year, when families get together, and you've got your sexist, racist, xenophobic, homophobic, transphobic, xenophobic uncle who is spouting, tell them to go fuck themselves. Make sure to argue with them. And this is important for online also, because what happens is that we are training other generations and our kids or whoever, that loud, obnoxious, hateful voice gets the last word. Mm-hmm. So if you're on your Facebook page and your crazy uncle starts spouting some stuff, argue with them. Do not let them go. Don't let them off. If somebody is like, oh, well, we're all going to get together for Thanksgiving, goes, well, he's got to shut up. Or make a reasonable and consistent argument, or I'm not going to show up. We have to hold those people accountable online and offline. Otherwise, if they dominate the space, all the message that we send to our families and to our fans or followers or whatever is that they always get the last word and they win. That they're the brave ones. It's like, no, always challenge them and never. What was it? I posted something yesterday, and somebody posted something, a quote from the Daily Caller, which is this extreme right-wing thing. And so I didn't argue with them, but I put, just for context, this is a neo-Nazi nutbag website. Mm-hmm. So when you're reading this article, know that, and that's who posted it. I don't gotta worry, this isn't my real friend, it's a Facebook friend. What am I gonna do, offend him? Be more than willing to offend people that you find offensive online. Never take a step backwards, because they will take a step forward and you will just end up with your back against the wall.
Thank you. I can grab that. I know it's awkward. Let's thank the panelists so we don't
Thank you so much. Thank you to each of you. Before anyone goes, though, don't run out. Okay. So again, thank you all so much for being here. Before we end, of course, I want to thank all of you for coming. Thank our panelists one more time. I want to have a special thanks for someone who's been pivotal in making this year's Getting Played. Let me do this before I drop it while I'm talking. Okay. I want to thank someone who's been pivotal in making this year's Getting Played Symposium a reality, from pitching venues, connecting with tech support, and fundraising. Really, she just jumped right in and offered to help with no expectations of anything in return, which was amazing. It's wonderful role modeling of what working for equity entails and should entail. So this year's Getting Played Equity Award goes to Devin LaBelle. you're very welcome. I mean, honestly, it really was, Devin just volunteered to help me. I've been a one-person show for so long, and seeing everyone here, like people like Natalie Leonard, who said, hey, you should do the general session at the State Bar annual meeting, right? It's like, it's people standing up and supporting and just jumping right in, and Devin really just was like, I'm gonna do whatever you need me to do to help you get this thing going. So I thank you so much, Devin, again. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Great job, everybody.
Yes, very good. Don't drop that on
We need to have this.
How we can turn it off. My breath.
That's a really good song.
Yeah.
Can you turn it off? Actually, it might look, it might be out of delay.
That's all.